Alright, so this is video lesson 5.1, and we're going to cover the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire. So just to kind of orient us here, we're going to kind of pick up and fill in the gaps of where we left off in class with our contextualization activity. So Rome began on the Italian peninsula. Remember, a peninsula is a piece of land that is surrounded by water on three sides. So we have Italy, our boot here, the Italian peninsula, simultaneous to the ancient Greeks. So these two civilizations were existing at the same time. They were simultaneous. And they were highly influenced by the ancient Greeks in the Roman Republic. So they had similar gods. We talked a little bit about that in class. They had similar architecture, similar culture, and they both had writing. Now, they had the same alphabet, but the Greeks obviously spoke Greek, and in Rome, they spoke Latin. So politically, Rome was first organized into a republic, which was a form of government where citizens elect their leaders. So originally in the Roman Republic, leaders were elected by the citizens. So just kind of locating us here today, we just talked about this, and then we're going to move on to the Roman Empire and focus on that a little bit more next class. All of this is a precursor to the Middle Ages, which also takes place in Europe. So we have to look at what came first, at the classical European history, and before we get to the Middle Ages or medieval period in history. So just to kind of debrief what we did in the contextualization activity. So China is mostly kind of down here. So this is the Seven Warring States about 476 BC. And then we have, or you could say BCE, the unification of Qin China in 221 BC. This is all during from about 500 to about 27 CE. This period of time right here is the Roman Republic. Then from this period up into about here is the Roman Empire. And so this is when we see Christianity emerge, we see the trans-Saharan trade routes begin, but in Han China is kind of still going on during that time period. But then Rome falls, and that's what we're going to focus on next class. All of the other stuff that we learned about is going to be more simultaneous with the Europe in the Middle Ages. So kind of the rise of the Islamic Empire and their golden age of China, the rise of the Aztecs and the Inca, the Mongols, those are all kind of in this high Middle Age period, so from 1000 CE forward. All right, so just a couple of illustrations of those similarities between the Greeks and the Romans. You can see they had columns, they had these triangle pavilions here on their buildings, and we also see very similar in their lettering. And in their gods as well. So then the Roman Republic, because it is elected by its citizens, it also has representatives. So they had the original Senate. Our Senate is named after the Roman Senate. And this was composed of about 300 members elected by citizens to make laws and levy taxes. Levy taxes means raise taxes. So you can kind of see the parallels that some people have drawn between Rome and the United States of America. So instead of a president, they had two leaders known as consuls who were both elected. They had a Senate of 300 leaders, as I just explained, to create their laws. They also had 8 judges chosen for 1 year, and to oversee the civil and criminal courts. And they also had a legal code, and their citizenship was all adult male landowners. So the people who could vote were adult males. Now this, and in particular, they had to own land. So if they rented or if they were homeless, they could not vote in this society. Or if they were a slave, they could not vote. So we'll get into that in a little bit. The Roman Republic was also known for their strong military, composed of legions, groups of about 5,000, who conquered much of the Mediterranean world by 500 BCE, which is where the Roman Republic kind of begins. So in the Roman Republic, the social structure is based on the family. Typically, the male is known as the leader of the family, and these families led by the male of the household are known as paterfamilias. And there were two key social classes. The higher class, or the nobility, were known as the patricians, and the lower classes were known as the plebeians. So you can kind of see this hierarchy broken down here. So any people in these groups were part of the plebeian, or the lower class. So the patricians were the social elite. They controlled most of the land and held key government and military positions. However, they were only about 5% of Roman society. They were very aristocratic, and they were the governing class. So they had the power, they had the control, because they had the land. So even though it kind of seems like a democracy, only the patricians could vote for those leaders. So about 5% of Roman society was the ones electing the leaders. And they lived in beautiful piazzas like this, and houses, and had kind of all of the finer things that the Roman Republic had to offer. The plebeians, however, were commoners, farmers, merchants, less wealthy landowners, and they comprised the majority of Roman society, and they paid the majority of the taxes. So they were the ones supporting this rich, wealthy lifestyle that the politicians were enjoying. All right, so slavery, it's important to keep in mind in our course that slavery predates the Roman Republic and Empire. Slavery is not just a concept that occurred with people being taken from Africa to the Americas. It was not based on race, and it was typically based on prisoners of war. So if you were captured in a battle, the Romans would have you as a slave in the Roman Republic. So you could be walking down a street, and a patrician and a slave could look very similar in terms of their physical features. So slavery was not based on race until the transatlantic slave trade. This is about 2,000 years before the transatlantic slave trade. So slavery was not a new subject, is basically my point. So it's important to keep this in mind when we're considering Roman society. There are also slave revolts in Sicily here. So Sicily is this island off the tip of Italy. The gender roles in the Roman Republic, they were the men taught farming, physical training of soldiers, and studying Roman ancestry. The women traditionally had domestic roles. And the upper class men and women were both taught to read. The emphasis for boys was on the importance of philosophy and rhetoric, which is the art of effective public speaking and writing. So kind of basically ownership of that language. So after the victories of the Punic Wars, the leading general, i.e. Julius Caesar, gained political power. So he becomes Caesar, and that's when he changes his name to Julius Caesar. Caesar literally means king in Latin. So under Julius Caesar, Rome became incredibly powerful, but faced challenges governing this massive empire. Let's go back to the map for a second. All of this was under his control. And so the military leaders became way too powerful. Caesar had too much competition, and so he was named dictator. And the senators basically feared this power and were saying that they were against his corruption of the republic, and so they ultimately assassinate Caesar by stabbing him in 44 BCE. This assassination marks the end of the trust in the republican system. So the Roman Republic transitions to the Roman Empire. So in the Republic, you can see our little comparison chart up here. The elected officials lead, whereas in the Roman Empire, an emperor leads. And whereas in the Republic, their leadership was 1 year, it was tenured, it had a term limit. Emperors do not have term limits. They were emperors for life, although many lives were cut short in that office as they were assassinated. And whereas in the Republic, the leaders were appointed by the Senate, the Roman Empire, it is taken by inheritance or by force. So it's a little bit more like a monarchy here in this Roman Empire. All right. So that is all we've got for you today. Make sure, if you haven't already, to Google Mankind's Story of All of Us, episode 3 on empires to catch up on what was given over the weekend after the midterm. That will be due next class as well as the quiz on Canvas for this video lesson.